What you see here is a family, the American Legion family. Our roots run deep. They're planted across the landscape of America and beyond. Over 3 million strong, more than 13,000 local posts in communities worldwide, millions of lives influenced, access across multiple generations. Our American Legion family has many branches, including you, who have chosen lives of public service. We thank you for that. Our family also extends to over 2 million members of the U.S. Armed Forces, nearly 345,000 employees of the Department of Veterans Affairs, millions of young people, and many others. The family has been nearly a century in the making. That's when our first generation crossed an ocean to confront a deadly enemy in a foreign hemisphere. Far away as it was, the Great War had at stake something more than the protection of European allies. Democracy, liberty, fairness and opportunity, values Americans have fought and died for since the Revolution, were in the crosshairs of tyranny. And so, our nation responded as it always does, with all its might, no matter the cost, no matter where. And we came away with a very hard-fought victory. Out of the blood-soaked trenches of Belgium and France arose a generation of veterans like none before. These young liberators from farms and factories of the United States would start the American Legion family because, frankly, the federal government at the time was poorly prepared to help veterans and their families adjust to life after war. Many of our first generation were disabled by combat, gassed, poisoned, blinded, and psychologically altered by the shock and horror of a new war, one fought with machine guns, tanks, airplanes, and chemical agents. Nearly 117,000 Americans gave their lives to successfully liberate Europe. Among our ranks, they are never forgotten. The American Legion was born of this generation, which inspires us today and our legislative agenda today, just 5 weeks away from the 100th anniversary of the U.S. entry into the war that was supposed to end all wars, but it didn't. Thus, we continue a discourse that they began, one that is vital today and is certain to continue long after we are gone. The American Legion's legislative agenda, in a new era of global war, bears many resemblances to that of our first generation. On the priority list then, as now, were concerns such as an effective health care and disability benefits system for veterans, a modern, timely, and fair process for veterans' benefits claims and appeals, education and training to give veterans the best possible chance to succeed in civilian life, best possible military equipment and training for operational advantage as well as troop safety, compassionate treatment for service-connected mental health conditions defined as shell shock or combat fatigue at the time, now known as post-traumatic stress disorder, and support for the families and children of veterans changed by military service. As problems and challenges have surfaced and resurfaced over the years, we have worked together to find solutions. Congress, VA, the Department of Defense, the American Legion, and veterans across the land, like a family of shared values and goals, not always agreeing on tactics, but always trying to do what's best for those who have served our nation in uniform. It is a continuous process because the landscape of veterans' issues is always changing. At one point in the not-so-distant past, for instance, quality was a prevailing problem at VA, not access. So we all worked together to turn VA into what is now described by its patients and most experts as the best care anywhere. An unpredicted result of higher VA quality in many areas became the long line to get appointments. Easing access to care is now VA's prevailing problem, and there is no reason we cannot achieve a solution by working together, as we have done before. The Choice Act of 2014 was a measure the American Legion saw only as a temporary fix to get veterans the care they needed from non-VA providers in their communities, if necessary, where necessary, as quickly as possible. Today, we understand that community care can be a viable option where VA services are far away or overbooked. However, we also know that veterans, when given their own choice, choose VA. Of approximately 1 million veterans who signed up for community care under Choice, only about 5,000 solely used non-VA providers rather than VA. The vast majority choose VA care, even if they had to wait for an appointment or travel over 40 miles to get there. The American Legion proposes an approach that would put non-VA care under a central VA authority as grantor of quality, to be used only where it makes the greatest sense for the time being. The long-term solution is a sustainable, state-of-the-art, 21st century VA healthcare system that will serve today's newest veterans and yet to come those for the rest of their lives wherever they reside. The answer cannot be all-out privatization or any dissolution of the VA system we have worked so hard to make great. The American Legion's first generation, whose veteran comrades were jailed, put in straitjackets, and held in asylums with undiagnosed PTSD, spent a decade fighting to create one federal agency to provide care for veterans and their families. Disability claims, health care, survivor benefits, hospitals, burials, and later college benefits, home loans, business financing, and more would come to live under the roof of VA. The model made sense. Service for veterans would be more efficiently managed. The VA was also to become an expression of gratitude from a grateful nation to those who have served and sacrificed. VA has never been perfect, and it has always been complicated. By virtue of that complexity, the agenda we share each year will always have plenty of unfinished business. We have plenty of that today, which I would like to address individually. Executive and employee accountability at VA falls under the heading of unfinished business. What tangible progress has been made to correctly discipline poor performers, some of whom have bordered on criminal and corrupt? During his confirmation hearing, Secretary Shulkin, said it would take an act of Congress to install more effective accountability standards at VA. If so, we have been there, done that, and can do it again. And on the flip side, how can we standardize performance bonuses to top caregivers and keep them from leaving VA for higher pay elsewhere? The American Legion does not oppose performance bonuses for VA's most valuable employees. It opposes not knowing the criteria upon which those bonuses are paid. Transparency is the key word in this concern. American Legion's system worth saving site visits continue to show shortages of key medical staff, contributed heavily to VA's access problem. It is hard to get a timely doctor's appointment when there simply aren't enough doctors available. Recruitment and retention at VA remain unfinished business. Also, if we know nothing else about it, PTSD and TBI affect individual sufferers differently. There is no magic pill. Over-medication can lead to isolationism and suicide. A customized approach involving whole families, peers, activities, and alternative therapies can go a long way toward binding up the invisible wounds of war. Greater progress needs to be made on that front. It is unfinished business. The same can be said of career opportunities. Today's veterans, who are 45% more likely than others to launch small businesses, should be able to use their GI benefits for startup costs. And those who were trained by military in specialized disciplines and had to execute those skills in battle should not be required to start their training over in order to receive a civilian license or certification in the same specialty. One more item on the unfinished business agenda that we need to cross off in this congressional session: VA appeals modernization. If the current process remains in place, VA estimates that by 2027, it will take an average of 10 years to get an appeals decision. Representative Dina Titus of Nevada has already introduced into the 115th Congress an appeals modernization bill that calls for transparency and a fast answer for veterans who had filed appeals of their claims decisions. No one should have to wait a decade for an answer from VA. As our American Legion social media hashtag states, America, veterans deserve better. I am asking now for your support to pass a VA appeals modernization bill. VA is indeed a progress in work. It has been since 1930 when the American Legion helped bring it into this world. But it is our work in progress, not a private contractor's. In the American Legion family, we describe VA as a system worth saving. We don't just say that, we believe that. And since the patient appointment scandal in 2014, we also believe that progress has been made. We look forward to working closely with Secretary Shulkin and VA Central Office as allies, not adversaries, to speed up that process, take care of our unfinished business, solve potential problems before they become crises, and take responsibility for a system of care the World War I generation knew was needed for our nation's veterans. To that generation, we owe much more, including a formal U.S. flag code. It took 19 years after the American Legion had its first flag conference in 1923 to gain congressional acceptance of rules to guide respect and proper care for the flag under which so many have fought and died. The American Legion will not budge on its reverence for our flag, supported by over 80% of the public, and asks once again, will you please pass a constitutional amendment to return to Congress the power to protect the United States flag from physical desecration? It is not, as the Supreme Court narrowly determined in a 5-4 vote, an act of free speech. It is behavior, it is intentional desecration, which can incite violence and defies everything our nation stands for. The American Legion is now preparing to celebrate its 100th anniversary in 2019. We will observe this milestone in every city and town, every congressional district, with activities and observances that pay tribute to our legacy and carry forward a vision for our second century. Legislation is now being drafted for the U.S. Mint to strike a commemorative coining for the American Legion's centennial. A request has also been submitted to issue an American Legion centennial U.S. postage stamp. We would be honored to count on your support for both the coin and the stamp, in tribute not so much to the American Legion as a branded veteran service organization, but to the American Legion as a symbol of democracy, liberty, fairness, and opportunity. 5 weeks from now, we will gather in Kansas City to honor American Legion families' first generation, those who went to fight in the Great War. We will be there not just to remember the battlefield victories, which were enormous, but to acknowledge all that the World War I veterans set in motion when they became citizens fully understand that success in America usually depends most on how well you do in the trenches. That's where you will always find the American Legion family, doing what we do best when no one else is watching for the good of our communities, states, and nation. We thank you for your time this morning. May God bless you, and may God bless our United States of America.